Welcome to a very special episode of the Tatiana Show. Today we have not one, but two guests, which I was only thinking we were going to get one truly awesome guest, but now we have a second guest coming on. So I'm not going to keep you guys in suspense the whole time. But our main guest today is Amir Taaki, who is a very controversial figure. I think he's a hero. He's responsible for a lot of interesting stuff going on in the Bitcoin space that he's going to tell us about. And he just got back from the Middle East. I read a really crazy story about it, and it prompted me to give him a call. But we also have my good friend Lyn Ulbricht, who, as you know, is the mother of Ross Ulbricht. And this week we have a book coming out by this guy named Nick Bilton, and he wrote basically a hit job on Ross's story. And a lot of us view Ross as a hero and as a victim of the drug war and a political prisoner. And unfortunately, the book doesn't exactly present him that way. There's a lot of salacious headline grabbing nonsense. And I wanted to give Lyn an opportunity to bring a little bit of clarity to that and then get Amir's take on it. So Lyn and Amir, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Tatiana Show.
Thanks.
Hello, Lyn.
Hi, Amir. It's so good to see you and hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being willing to let me come on for a look.
Great. Lyn, so can you fill us in on what's going on with this book?
Yeah, the book is, the narrative of the book is based on uncharged, unproven allegations by the government that they didn't have the confidence to bring to trial or to prosecute from an indictment. They have done nothing official with it at all. And Nick Bilton wrote a narrative based on this as if it's true. And of course, in the media world, they're all repeating it from his book as if it's true. As far as I know, he does not bring up any of the questions of the case. I think he's trying to keep it, my guess is he's trying to keep it simple, a story that's very sensationalistic, sellable, understandable by the general public. Amir can talk to this. I believe there were many DPRs, certainly more than one. And after Ross was in prison, now we have found proof. Well, I didn't, but you know, there has been proof found that DPR logged into the Silk Road 7 weeks after Ross was arrested. And also there's been proof of evidence tampering found. And I really doubt that this is in the book. He just talks about it as if it's totally fact that Ross arranged murders for hire, even though all his convictions are nonviolent. Ross has a complete reputation. No one has ever said Ross is dangerous, violent, any of that ever. And Nick Bilton calls him dangerous. And, you know, as I said, these allegations were not even put forward by the government as official charges. And a federal judge, a former federal judge, joined Ross's appeal saying it is wrong to bring in these kinds of allegations without them being part of a trial and use them to put someone away for life. And I consider it a media lynching, and because it's based on this kind of narrative that has no substance that, you know, has been brought forward at all. So
yeah,
well, the overview.
Yeah, that's pretty damaging. Amir, we muted you because there was some background noise, but if you just hit your unmute button, I'd love to get your take on it. Obviously, as somebody who's met Ross and I've gone to the prison, the idea that he's a murderous kingpin is pretty patently ridiculous. He's probably one of the most peaceful people that I know, not to mention one of the kindest. And in general, the way that he's handled his incarceration is an inspiration not only to me, but to many other people. Amir, if you can unmute yourself, there's a little button on the Google Hangouts, and then you can weigh in on this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hello?
there we go. Yep.
So wait, what were you asking about Ross Ulbricht?
Well, we were wondering, you know, I wasn't really involved in the case at the time that it was kind of coming out, but you had said that you had spoken with DPR and you felt that there were different people each time that you spoke with somebody. So I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, no, I did speak with Ross Ulbricht before. Well, not Ross Ulbricht, DPR, and their attitudes between like a few years were very different. So I can't say. I mean, obviously, it's not something that you can use as evidence in a court. Amir Taaki's got a hunch that it's different people, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, really good evidence. But what I will say is that Ross Ulbricht, or the DPR, sorry, was very ideological. It wasn't a guy that was running the Silk Road because they were a profiteer. They realized the amount of risk they were taking, and you could tell by their attitude, by their writings. I do believe that that when you have someone who's writing in a certain way, it's not just talk. You know, it comes out in strong writing, like when someone like really have conviction and really believe what they're doing, and so DPR, you really had a sense that they felt they were on a divine mission. You know, they were doing something of great importance, which you know, the state is basically an economic interest that take the surplus products from civilization and have tentacles in administration, military, and ideological, and they are the biggest threat to human freedom and to human society. What we're witnessing now in the West is the total and complete breakdown of civil society. We were at the center of Atlanticism. The parallels with the end days of Rome are really striking. So Silk Road was something very important that in this struggle against the state and for freedom, but not just like here's a market where you can buy drugs, but it also had a huge symbolic value. And I would argue that a big reason why Bitcoin became so cool and became so interesting was because of drug markets. Bitcoin did not get where it is because people can buy coffee or can buy socks off the internet. It got where it is because it was seen as a potent weapon that people could actually use to thrust forward their politics and their ideology. And that's now what we're seeing with Bitcoin, is like the reason Bitcoin has stagnated. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people are working on a lot of things in Bitcoin, but there's not really, you know, Bitcoin, there's not really anyone working on something in Bitcoin, if you know what I mean. There's not really that sense of Bitcoin going somewhere with a trajectory. And Ross Ulbricht, you know, they sentenced that guy to life. Like, not, well, I guess Lyn knows better, but they gave him a long sentence.
Double life plus 40 years for people who are just...
Double life plus 40 years. And pedophiles get less than that in the prison, you know?
Murderers, kidnappers, all Vegas.
Yeah, yeah. So it's something seriously wrong.
Yeah.
That a guy that take a lot of violence out of drug markets, and they didn't look at this ethically. They didn't look, okay, what's good for society? Okay, put this guy in jail. We're going to reduce the harm on society. We're going to reform him. No, it's a purely it's a punitive thing they've done. They sent this guy to prison because they want to punish him. They want to send a message to other people as well. But the way that DPR ran the Silk Road was he ran it ethically. Like, he believed in ethical principles. He said, you know, there will be no drugs, there will be no fraud, and what's happened now is you're not going to stop the drug markets. You can't stop. You know, technology is advancement of knowledge, and when somebody develop a new piece of technology and put that into the domain, you're seeding an idea. Now it's something that human beings control. We obviously put our ideals into that. But yeah, no, the drug markets are out there into the open now. All you've done by taking out DPIs is you took the ethics out of the game, now there's all different drug markets, and if you want to enter that, if you want to enter that world, you have to do it with a sense of wild abandon, like almost like sacrificial way. The only people that are going to do that are going to be like wild profiteers who are going in there with a kind of like jihadi mindset that it's an all or nothing, you know, like we're going straight for the time with no sense of ethics, no sense of divine mission. I think putting, even if Ross Ulbricht was DPR, putting him in prison is a big mistake for the well-being of society, and also not the kind of sign that we want to be sending to people. I mean, it's still the financial crisis, how many years on, and how much fraud and all the links inside the deep state, and nothing's really materialized from that. So, like, really, those interests that put Ross Ulbricht in the prison, they're obviously very short-sighted. I don't think they understand like the true ramifications or true impact of the times that we're living in and the direction that society is going into. And really, they are like a kind of product of their own demise. But yeah, Ross Ulbricht is a hero, and obviously Silk Road was something that was very important. I mean, not just as a market where you can buy drugs, but as a sociological experiment. Like, you now have a market where everybody, all the actors are anonymous. There's no state in that, and yet people are able to conduct trade. You know, and that's a really important question. Is this question of the interests of capital and which are interlinked on an elite global level that form this global hegemony. You know, the likes of people like Hillary Clinton and now I guess Donald Trump has like entered into that, and the whole thing of this. Elite interests of capital is actually very anti-market, anti-economy, anti-trade. So our real question now is, since we do live in a system where economy has superseded politics, but it's not economy in general, because real economy is like, economy comes from the Greek word for household management. Economy was something that was seen as like the root of society, but but right now what we have is a cartel, or one group of monopolists who control politics, and it's really scary because it's the most powerful nation in the world, and that's something that actually oppose human development, actually oppose markets, and is very harmful to societies. Like, we don't live. Like in older classical societies, they used to put politics above economy. But in our society, it's pure economic interests that are above the political. So when we understand how, like, our current situation, when we have like this kind of analysis, and we understand like why Bitcoin is so important, and something like Silk Road, why that is also so important. It's a landmark in the history. You know, because technology is a driver of the civilizational process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was why Ross was so harshly punished about Bitcoin and an alternative currency. I don't think, judging from the other sentences, that it was about drugs at all. I don't, and of course there are many things sold on Silk Road. It wasn't just drugs, but you know, I don't think that was why the government was so harsh with him.
Yeah, I was really surprised at just how much of a kind of ideological bent was on the site, because when I first heard about it, I said, oh, whatever, people selling drugs on the internet, it just didn't affect my life. But when I saw the Deep Web film, which I think is excellent, it really gave you some insight that this wasn't just a bunch of people that wanted to get together and do a bunch of drugs, but this was an ideological statement. And I think that is why Ross was punished so severely, because he dared to dissent. And again, we don't even know what involvement Ross had with it. And that's what's the most frustrating thing is that, you know, we all casually say Ross made the Silk Road, but do we really know what that even means? Because his whole entire trial was a joke. There was no evidence that was able to really be examined. You know, the defense wasn't given a chance to defend Ross, and a lot of the evidence itself potentially was tampered with.
Yeah, no, we have proof that some of the evidence was tampered with. That was found after trial. So, and now a book's been written about stuff that wasn't even in trial, as if it's true. I mean, it wasn't even, he wasn't even convicted for it or charged with it. And this book is coming out as if that's all true. So,
Amir, why do you think that, because there are other people that are sort of in the crosshairs of government in terms of people that are causing problems. Why do you think that Ross would have been punished so severely had he been in a different country? You know, what do you think the U.S. attitude about this kind of thing is compared to, for example, the UK, where you're based sometimes?
Well, America and UK at the center of Atlanticism, and yeah, no, I can't understand why. I mean, if he did do it, I can't understand why he remained in America. Like, why he didn't go to some like African country where there's very little law and order, and obviously and like set up his own shop there. But I don't know. It's just pure speculation, you know. But yeah, now there was a new movie yesterday I saw called Hacker, and it's about a guy who it's like working for the deep web, and there's like a guy with an anonymous mark. I haven't seen the movie yet, you know, but I just saw the description, and because I found it on Popcorn Time and watched a little bit of it. I'm going to watch it, but I think that movie was probably based off of Dread Pirate Roberts. It's probably influenced by the Deep Web movie. So there's something that both like you guys, especially Lyn, should maybe see, you know, to see how they're producing propaganda. Because a friend of mine said he saw it, and he said they were trying to make it look like the hackers are the bad guys.
oh yeah.
And which is interesting, because it gives you a sort of sense about, you know, what was that, Mr. Robot as well. Mm-hmm. It started off
Yeah.
like showing, oh yeah, cool, we're going to do the revolution, but then into the second series it became completely, I was expecting we'd see like a revolution, you know, we'd see what would be the aftermath, what would be the effects, and like how the society would be changed. No, it just was completely narcissistic and self-centered, you know, with the message like, oh, look at these guys who are trying to do good, but actually they ended up doing more bad
That's the narrative.
than they expected. Yeah, it's the narrative that's been pushing. So it's kind of like, oh, stay with us guys, because, you know, what comes after is going to be worse, you know, which is, that's never a solution for anything, you know. And right now what I'd say is the Silk Road was a big innovation. You have to understand, like, all of these moving parts that came together to build that. So that's something that take vision and foresight. Obviously, it was driven by like a huge amount of ideals, which, you know, like when somebody has like a lot of belief, like they think about things a lot, and a lot of like thought and energy goes into something before it like actually appears in a product. So the creator of Silk Road was obviously obviously like had a lot of thought process behind what they're doing, and what's the effects of what they're doing, and the ethics. I don't think it was like this kind of black market gangster profiteer, someone who really believed in what they're doing, and obviously took a big sacrifice or martyred themselves for a cause. So we should make DPR a symbol of our movement, and we should venerate Ross Ulbricht as a hero, and in the name of our heroes, we should conduct our struggle to build political technology because we like to fight, and to advance our ideals. because yeah, if we want to, if people want to, if they want justice for Lyn Ulbricht, I would say the biggest thing that you can be doing is building more technology to support the struggle for freedom, political technology, in the same vein as Bitcoin and Silk Road, because Bitcoin is a really intense area of research right now. Bitcoin is a big opportunity, but Bitcoin is not a product that exists by itself. It's not something that exists in isolation. Technology is built by human beings, and people tend to forget that. You know, people are like, oh, this technology, it does X, Y, Z, and therefore we're going to be liberated. But technology is never finished. Technology is something that you work on continuously for like your whole life. Like if I build a software product and I want that software product to persevere, I have to keep working on it, you know, and the more I work on it, the more it's going to spread. And so it's a continuous work. It's not something we do. And through our work, we shape technology, we add to it, we put our own values in it. And right now, what this is a call for people in Bitcoin to start to realize that the power of Bitcoin is not simply in the product of Bitcoin, but also in its symbolic, in its ideological level. Bitcoin is as much shaped as it is by analytical forces, as it is by social forces, by sociological forces. That we cannot expect Bitcoin to grow and to succeed by removing politics from Bitcoin. That we really need to infuse Bitcoin with its early spirit. You know, we need to keep that going because
yeah, I agree.
Because it's not simply about okay, we make Bitcoin and it does this and it exists as some product, but there's a community around that. There's developers, and also Bitcoin has symbolic power, and the way it inspires people to use Bitcoin, the types of products that people create around Bitcoin, and the culture that exists in Bitcoin, and Silk Road was a very, very symbolic part of that, but it's not enough, and that needs to keep going on, because
I'm on a video.
Because making Bitcoin right now, all I'm seeing is there's a lot of people are doing a lot of work on Bitcoin, but they're not really doing anything, if you know what I mean. It's like, oh, cool, we got this new feature, and we've got to make this new thing, and we tweaked it to be a little bit faster, and we got rid of some bugs, but in the end, that's not going to change anything. You know, it's going to make Bitcoin nicer to use, but it's not actually going to change anything. And we have to ask ourselves, what is more important for us? Is it Bitcoin, or is it what Bitcoin sells? Is it the movement, or is it the politics? And you see this in societies as well. For instance, in an evolutionary society, people tend to see politics as something that's passive, as something that just happens spontaneously, and as a consequence, those kind of societies, they lack vitality and they lack the ability to pull people forwards, and they end up getting lost between themselves. Whereas, for instance, like in the early American Revolution, or at the time of the Enlightenment, or even the Russian Revolution, like having a revolutionary movement, what it does is it pulls people forwards towards an objective, and it gets people to create new philosophy, and that philosophy also gives a sense of direction to people who are working. And in the same way that a military or an army, by pulling all of its forces together, can hit the enemy in strategic points that enable the army to advance forwards. That's how we need to be thinking about the technologies that we're creating. That it's not simply about building technology for the sake of building technology. No, we're building technology with a sense of purpose in mind. And you know, there were these Arab Spring protests where a bunch of liberals, for instance, in Egypt, in Tahrir Square, a bunch of liberals flooded into the square and they overthrew the government, and then they like threw out the government using Facebook, and then people say, okay, now what? What's next? And nobody had a plan. So, you know, they sit down and they start disguise lots of arguments and conflicts. But the people that came along and they did have a plan were the Islamists. They said, okay, we're going to do this, and they took them over. They took over their revolution, and now all of those revolutions didn't succeed. They were either taken back over by dictators or by Islamists. And why? Because liberal ideology is an ideology of nothingness. It lacks a sense of destiny and principles. And in Bitcoin right now, what we're the way that Bitcoin is going is this idea of Bitcoin. Oh, it's a tool, everybody can use it how they want to use it. It's going to do X, Y, and Z. But I think it's really important that we start to sit down as technologists and we develop a utopia, you know, a sense of like where we want to be in a few years and how technology is going to help us advance to that level. And I think, and personally, I think it should be a social vision, not a technological utopia where with, you know, giant centralized computer or whatever, but actually a vision of like a free society, you know, where people organize between themselves, and but how the technology can serve people to create those structures and how it can advance those ideas. Like, and when I talk about advancing ideas, you have to understand, like, there was an Indian king called Ashoka, and he invaded East India and with his army and his military, and then he became Buddhist, and he withdrew his army and he sent Buddhist monks instead, and so now that part of India is Buddhist. So it's like, for instance, I was in a revolution in Rojava in North Syria, and a lot of anarchists, for instance, they asked me, okay, oh, how does the revolution work? Like, what institutions do they have? What structures do they have? And the way I see it is, if you want to understand Christianity, it's not useful to think about how many churches there are, or what's the hierarchy, or who's in charge of the priests, or what, you know, organizations there are. That's not the way to understand Christianity. Maybe it's a part of it, but if you understand Christianity, you have to understand the teachings behind Christianity. What are the ideas behind Christianity? Because Christianity is something that people spread to each other, and they study the texts and they study the religion, and that influence their behavior, that influence how they are as human beings. And so we have to start treating our politics like that. Our ideology is a religion that we spread to other people. It's a set of teachings, and we have all the rioters and so on. It's not just about structure. It's not just about how the thing look physically, materially. It's also about the mentality. It's also about the beliefs that exist in people. So that's why I'm saying is that anarchism needs to change. In general, anarchism needs to change. You need to incorporate this ideological, spiritual, social side, not only the purely...
Yeah.
Sorry, I got someone else calling me. All right.
Wow, that is so brilliant. So you said so many amazing things just now.
Wait, I'm trying to get back on it.
For a while. No, really.
Can you see me? Because I can't.
No, we can't see you.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm back again. Yeah, so yes, it's not just purely the material, analytical side. You know, like when you look at a corporation, there's that guy in charge, and he owns these guys, and there's those guys below him, and you know, it's like a very scientific which
We're losing.
actually it's the analytical way. It's the analytical Western civilization that came from ancient Rome. That actually put us in this mess to begin with. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Amir, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Now we can't. He spoke too soon.
Wow, that was something.
Indeed. I'm really curious to hear about what happened to him, because he was in the UK and sort of mid dark wallet building. And then he went over to Syria because he had heard about this anarchist society that was being developed there. I wish Amir was here to tell this story because I'm not the person to tell it, but
Maybe he'll come back,
Yeah, I hope so, because that's really quite interesting. What I wonder about anarchism, because I pretty much have given up on government doing a very good job, right? I would happily take a libertarian position if that's all we can get, but essentially, I think once you go down the liberty route, you start thinking, well, what is justified force, what isn't, and whatnot. But I worry that people are not mentally there in order to accept such a society. Like, if we had no rules whatsoever, I think that it's very easy for bad actors to come in and fill the void.
Yeah, that's what's happened historically.
Yeah, but then what do people who do know how to interact with each other peacefully, where is that solution?
Yeah.
In practice, not just in theory, because in theory we could all say, oh yeah, we'll all have free things. And I had a guest the other day, Ryan Dawson, he was saying that, so wait, you're saying that we can build a phone like this, but we can't lay down some asphalt, like referring to who would build the roads, right? Because oftentimes people worry about who would build the roads. And I thought it was a very good point, but ideologically, I don't know. I don't know if people are really there yet. I mean, do people even know about the non-aggression principle? And if they do, is it something that they adhere to? How do you deal with that kind of society? And also the shaking out of the existing property and just capital that each person has. So let's say the government explodes tomorrow. It's not like everybody's going to have an equal amount of money that they're going to equally have access to further themselves in the world. On a practical level, I think that it's going to be a little bit challenging. Although considering the murder rates of governments around the world in the 20th century, it was like over almost 300 million people were murdered by their own government, which, the worldwide. So that's much worse than, just a couple random bad murderers roaming around comparatively.
And that doesn't even count people being put in cages too.
I know, I was thinking of the same thing, because think about all the other lives that are ruined. There was this guy that I spoke to yesterday, Weldon Angelos, I think, if I'm correctly recalling his name. And he was sentenced to jail. They did this stacking thing of mandatory stacking. And so I think he sold like $350 worth of weed, and they wanted to give him 55 years.
Well, that's basically what they did with Ross. It's consecutive as opposed to combining it. And she had the option to do that, and she instead gave him consecutive.
Oh, Amir, great. We're glad we have you back. We're very curious to hear, me and Lyn are both fans of some anarchy ideas for sure, but I'm curious about your trip to Syria. So for people who are just tuning in, you are sort of a crypto anarchist, you've been working on dark wallet, and then you were called to go to Syria because there was sort of like an anarchist bloom. Can you maybe give me a little bit of an insight into how that worked on a practical level? And I know that you had some interesting things happen along the way to trying to reform the society, including being handed a gun and having to fight ISIS. So that's pretty wild. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Kurds. The Kurds are like a marginalized group of people in Turkey and a bunch of other countries, and they've been fighting a war for their independence from Turkey since like hundreds of years. Basically, there's like the concept of rebellion is very deeply rooted in their culture. And they're mountain people, you know. So mountain people have always like have a strong sense of rebellion and maintaining their own culture, you know. And yeah, in the 70s, the PKK started a war against Turkey, and they were basically a communist group, like a Stalinist group. But through the process of their struggle against the Turkish army, they shaped their beliefs and their action. And then in the 90s, they started to become anarchists, and they started to consume anarchist literature, and they developed actually an ideology called democratic confederalism, which is actually better than anarchism, is far more contemporary, and it actually better explains the situation that we're in now. And when the Syrian war broke out, basically there was a massive power vacuum, and mostly Islamists basically took over Syria. But then this guerrilla group crossed over into North Syria, and they started organizing the society. And because they had a plan of what they wanted to make and how they're going to make the society, they managed to hold on, and not just hold on, actually persevering, like considering the amount of pressure they're under, like you know, like they started organizing the society into cooperatives economically. They started to create, you know, institutions for women and for youth, art and culture centers. They started to organize local militias, teach the people how to defend themselves, create neighborhood assemblies for people to be able to resolve governance issues. So like real anarchist ideas being put into practice, and not just like some armchair people going, oh yeah, you know, it's not ideal, you know, but it's a huge opportunity. You've got a place with a revolutionary government that wants to put anarchist ideas into practice, and so there's like a huge scope to bring new ideas and new philosophies there, especially around technology. A lot of the things that we talk about technology and anarchism, also new contemporary ideas about anarchism. But the really interesting thing was going there and learning about anarchism from the revolutionaries there, learning that they have a really well-developed ideology that I think is really contemporary. Now in Europe, and also in America, we're seeing the rising neo-traditionalists, the alt-right, which are nationalists, but there's nothing opposing that. You know, the liberals basically finished, and the problem with anarchism is it doesn't have a plan for how we can create an anarchist society. They have a plan, and it's an anarchist ideology. It's something that people should really start studying, and with the full weight of the revolution in North Syria behind this ideology, I think this ideology is going to play a very important role in our coming future. It is the most important revolution of this century. It is the only lasting anarchist revolution in human history. That's something that's really remarkable. So obviously, when I heard about that, there's no choice. I had to go, and it's really good that I went, actually, because not only have I gained a lot of new philosophical perspectives from learning from the people there. You know, like what the guerrillas do in the mountains is they study philosophy. That's how the base of this movement is made, is through extended study and critique of political philosophy and history. It's a movement that draws on many different currents and strains of thought, which is highly contemporary, really interesting. And they're also implementing it as well. So people around the world have a lot to learn from what the revolutionaries are doing there. is the biggest part of Syria. It's a region with 5 million people. There's not been something like that in anarchist history before. And we have to also, the way that we approach this thing is not to be dogmatic. We need to understand, like, what are the ideas behind this, like what are the critiques, because they have very well developed critiques against anarchism, against Marx, and against capitalism. And right now, our crisis in the West is not a crisis of distribution of wealth. It's not a crisis. There's not enough hospitals or schools. Our crisis is a crisis of meaning and purpose. That there's no sense of living for something greater. You know, a lot of people are lost. Something really interesting is I've never seen the amount of mental disorders in my life as I've seen in England. And I was in Syria in a war. There's not that huge level of mental disorders as there are in England. We have to ask ourselves why. You know, and I was reading a review by Orwell of Mein Kampf, and he was saying that capitalism and communism, they offer the people a good time, basically offer the people a good time, whereas Hitler offers people struggle and purpose and meaning. And Orwell was saying that like it's a bad thing, but you know, I kind of have to agree with Hitler on that. You know, that society is not just built through mutual exchanges. A society is built through people who really believe they're doing something great, who are willing to put themselves out there, often at considerable great cost to themselves. Like from Bitcoin, I've not made, I haven't profited personally off of Bitcoin. Like in fact, like Bitcoin's just been, if I talk about Bitcoin personally, it's probably a negative, the amount of time and energy I've invested in that. But it has been very fulfilling. I have done a lot of very interesting things, met a lot of very interesting people. It's like helped me in my life to grow, to move upwards. So that's like a kind of perspective that we're missing in the West. You know, this idea, and it's something that Nietzsche talks about a lot, which is that through overcoming challenge and obstacle, we move upwards, we develop as human beings, we move towards becoming a higher form of life. And
Ross wrote me a letter just interjecting for that exact thing, which is that he's grown through this adversity. And I think you're right. I really think you're onto something there. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm just saying Ross
no, it's fine.
would agree with you. He would be saying, yeah, it's lacking and it's something that's really important.
Yeah, I also was thinking about, you know, the Bitcoin community in general and how when I first joined it, the idea that bankers would be exalted just a few years later would be laughable. And now there's this giant corporate conference going on, and I just got a notification about 3 top women in blockchain, and they were all bankers. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't join the Bitcoin community to help banks make money more efficiently. I did it to disrupt the world. And people sometimes they ask me to write a Bitcoin song for this, that, or the other thing, you know, this coin or that coin. And I'm not going to do that because I didn't write the Bitcoin jingle because it was Bitcoin specifically. I wrote it because of the ideology behind Bitcoin and the thing that unified me with people from all different walks of life, with all different kinds of experiences, work experience, you know, cultural experience, and it kind of was an equal playing field. So it's kind of sickening to see that dissipate, but at the same time, I think that there are other people that really do resonate with that. And the only thing that those of us who still have a soul, when dealing with this currency, you know, we have to sing about it. Maybe not physically, like I do, but I think that that having that message, you know, not let that get covered up by the corporate interests is an important and critical point of development.
Yeah, no, it's totally right. Like when we exalt technology or Bitcoin as this thing by itself, then it becomes like everything for Bitcoin, everything to, even if that mean compromise with our ethics and our values. But when we realize that there actually is something higher than Bitcoin, which is what we're actually about, and Bitcoin is actually a path for us to exalt that belief, then it gives us a sense of direction, and it gives Bitcoin a spirit, and it gives Bitcoin an identity, things that are really important for people who want to be attracted to Bitcoin for the right reasons, to feel like they're participating in a historical process, and also it's a job of programmers to also develop this social perspective, to realize that when they develop software, that the software is not simply a functional tool. The software is also a piece of symbolism that's advancing this cause, is advancing this movement. So, and it's a mistake to think that making something like Bitcoin is just completely outside of human realm and human experience. And there's I was guilty of this. Yeah, I'm a programmer, and when you're building technology, what you're doing is you're making models of the real world, and programming them in the computer. And if you do that enough, you start to think, the whole world is like a computer, and people are like models, and it become very easy to try and like simplify the world into simple explanations, and to forget about all the other side of the human experience, which is, history and culture and society and politics and philosophy, and like not easy things to understand, like things that you have to study, and the actual reality of our situation is very complex. And when we try to remove the complexity out of reality, what we're doing is we're basically helping to support the same forces of the state. And if we want to be able to break free of that, we need to develop our analysis. We need to develop our ability to analyze, because right now the only thing that I see that anarchists are doing basically is playing the role of the rebellious children of the system. We're not actually challenging power in any serious, organized, collective, structured way. We're not actually challenging the centers of power. We're doing things that feel good and make us feel good, but in the end, it's not changing anything. And when we separate the material from the ideological, we realize that, okay, the material is something which is very much based off of what we can touch, based off of like the whole idea of looking at the human being as like a functional object is something as a seeing the human being as, we need to maximize their happiness in terms of wealth and security and whatever other factors. It's a very mathematical way of looking at people. When we look at human beings like that, it's just, okay, like to build the materially beneficial society, we have to satisfy everybody's material wants, and don't get me wrong, I like central heating and modern clothing. So industrial production is very important for people to be able to live well. But when that becomes the sole focus of the society, and not making a society which is cultured, which allow people to aspire, which help people, to uplift people, to make them free, to put arts and history and culture also at the center of society, to create strong social fabric between people, then we're denying a really important part of the human experience. But when we also look at that side of the humanity, then that's side of the humanity that's based off of the divine, based off of ideology, based off of greater beliefs, living for something greater. So there needs to be a balance, because right now we just live in a completely materialistic society. And you can even see that in arts as well, how the arts is completely animalistic, purely just based off shock value. You know, like if you look at the old Christian art, there's values in that. There's like it's trying to spread something. It exists like for the divine, with a sense of divine purpose, whereas the art today is completely, you know, there's no values in any of it. And that's how the modern system is able to persevere and survive, is a hegemony that's constantly shifting, and it worked by liquidating all values and integrating it into this diffuse whole. It's like I tell people, right, that you can be a liberal and you can be a Muslim, but you can't be an anarchist and a Muslim. You know, and that's the difference. Like liberalism doesn't have any values. Like it just wants to integrate all values into a nameless whole, whereas anarchism does have values. We do stand for something, and that's now the challenge of our movement. Is it's so diffuse and disparate, and there's no clear conception about, okay, what are we striving for? And now, as technologists, like we need to start, like, because we're in a very critical time. I don't know if people realize this. Like, history is changing rapidly. It's changing, like the ground under our feet is shifting. You know, we're basically in a global war already. And if you look at Russia, for instance, Russia has a clear geopolitical plan that they've been working towards consistently since the last few decades. And the way, even though they're not as wealthy, like materially, as America is, the way that they develop their weapons systems, as an example, just one example, the way that they've developed their weapons systems is completely in line with their geopolitical strategy. Whereas America, how has America developed their weapon systems? With no sense of foresight or long-term planning, simply more and more bigger bombs to go and attack someone far away. And what's the consequence of this is that Russia, in its area, in its sphere of influence, has completely outmaneuvered America. And this is a very important area, like Eurasia, like areas like Kazakhstan and the Middle East. Russia has basically outmaneuvered America. So there's the power balance that's now shifting away from America. And that's because the way that American government works is purely on an analytical level, without foresight. And whereas Russia, they do have a very strong philosophy behind them. I don't know if anybody knows Alexander Dugin. That's a really interesting guy. I call him the Rasputin of Putin. Rasputin was a guy that was whispering in the ear of the Tsars. He didn't have an official position. He didn't actually he wasn't like the head of this or that. He was just a guy that had a very important spiritual influence on the Tsars. And that would obviously, he'd affect their spiritual beliefs, and that would affect how they behave. And so there's this guy, Alexander Dugin. He's like the modern day version of that. He doesn't have an official place in the Russian government, but he exerts enormous influence over the Russian government. Basically, everything they're doing now is in line with Dugin's philosophy and ideas. One of the books he's written is called Geopolitics of Russia. It lays out the geopolitical plan for Russia over the next 20 years. He's written another one of his books is called The Fourth Political Theory. That book is very influential among the European far right. You know, and so Russia is actually fighting on this level that I'm talking about, the symbolic, the ideological. America is not. America is saying, okay, we've got to stop Islamic radicals. But and now they've got a new program in UK called Prevent. You know, when they see someone consuming extremist material, they go and intercept that person, and they try and say, okay, you know, you're going to be a terrorist. Yeah, you shouldn't be a terrorist. We're going to monitor you. But you're always playing a game of cat and mouse. The root issue here is that our governments lack an ideology that can inspire the population to work towards something. Now, politicians are basically just glorified managers. They don't have any kind of like when you look at if you read in the newspaper how they're talking about political candidates for elections, basically like a celebrity contest. It's not talking about what their ideas are. It's going, oh, you know, Theresa May, she's so dynamic. Oh yeah, you know, Jeremy Corbyn, he's so meek. You know, it's like it's just completely surface based, completely, you know, visual. You know, it's sensate. It's not like, okay, what's actually the root of their ideas? You know, like what are their values? What are they standing for? That's where we've gone as a culture, and we're in a serious societal decline right now, like actually really serious. You know, it's the same. You know, like this civilization we've inherited is from ancient Rome. We're actually witnessing the same things that happened at the end of Rome. You know, like when at the end of Rome they were giving out grain handouts to the proletariat, and they were just watching gladiator games all the time. That's basically what's happening now. Everybody's just consumed by watching football and claiming welfare from the state. You know, same thing happened in ancient Rome, and also they started to overburden their provinces with too high taxes. The provinces started to rebel in the early ages of the Roman Empire. Like Rome had a sense of divine purpose, divine mission. We're going to spread Roman values to the world, and a lot of provinces, a lot of countries, nations actually welcomed Rome because it actually brought civilization to them. They built roads, they brought stability, they brought peace, they brought a single currency. But then as Rome started to become more wealthy and it started to become more corrupt, and rulers stopped believing in the divine mission of Rome, they started to just believe in themselves, and there grew a huge class of the proletariat in Rome who were just living off of grain handouts from the state, and just spending all of their time watching gladiator games, talking about gladiator games. And to support that lifestyle, Rome had to heavily tax all the provinces, whereas before the people in the provinces were subjects. Rome started to make them into slaves to support their lifestyle. That's when the Roman Empire started its collapse. And right now, what do we have? We have a global hegemony, with its root. This is the center of the root of that is America, a lavish lifestyle, where now all the provinces are starting to rebel. We're seeing a breakup of the global empire. Like whereas before there was this whole idea of one single correct ideology that would rule the world, whether that was liberalism or whether it was communism. Now we're actually starting to see like a return to difference, like nations like, for instance, Russia in particular, but also I'd say Islamic movements, also India, also other countries around now are starting to return back away from global geopolitics, globalization. So I say, okay, we want to maintain our spheres of influence in our geographical areas. That's the way that politics is shifting. It's a very good thing, because it's opening up a lot of new spaces, a lot of new diversity, where people can struggle for their own political visions. We have to realize that breakup is not something that's only happening geographically, but it's also happening within the structure of power itself. You know, there's a lot of divisions being created. There's also the structure of power is having to become more tyrannical to maintain its grip. But where these new spaces are opening up, that is a chance for new upstarts to seize the initiative, to take power. And but to be able to do that, first we need like a clear conception of like, first of all, we need an actual clear analysis of like what are the actual problems in the society now. And to do that, we need to develop our ability to analyze. And it's not a simple explanation. The reality is complex, and we need to go into the roots of civilization, into the history and into the philosophy, as well as into the logic and into reason and all of the areas. We need to develop like a complete understanding of in a wide variety of disciplines. We need to reintegrate all the disciplines back together again, you know, not just like, oh, this is a separate object of study, you know, and only this way is valid to understand. No, all the disciplines are part of an integral whole. Once we have that critique, then we can develop like a vision, like what is the vision of the society we want to create, and what are our values. And from that, we create an identity. From that identity, we have a movement. So why is it important to have an ideology? Because an ideology is a structured set of beliefs that give shape and form to a movement of people. If we want to be able to move as a body of people together, we need to have an ideology. We need to have a plan of action, and for people to be able to have a sense of direction, to be able to, like a army, be able to hit where the structure of power is weak, where we can make the most difference, where we can claim power for our beliefs, and realize a libertarian society. Now is the time to do that. But the problem is we're lost in a very, I'd say like a very egoistic, kind of egoistic, and yeah, like a kind of, you know, like I go into hacker spaces, and it looks like I see all these people with like great power. They have the ability to literally shape civilization, to literally like change the course of history, but instead they're using it making toy trains, you know, like making toys. Like they're basically adolescents who like never grew up. It's like, do you see what's happening in the world around you? Like, do you honestly see like what's happening now? And you're trying to withdraw from society to amuse yourself, like, to entertain yourself. What? Like, I can't understand sitting in front of a computer to play on a computer, making codes. It doesn't interest me. Like, why would I sacrifice my life like that to do what? You know, it's
Let me just
pointless.
interrupt again, because Ross I spoke at a hacker conference, and Ross gave me something to read, and he said, use your exceptional ability, because not everybody can do this, for good, for exactly what you're saying. It's like, use it for to further good and liberty and freedom for people, not to be a black hat and hurt people, but also, like you're saying, you know, just frivolously, you know, make toys or whatever. And so I just wanted to say that he felt the same way.
Yeah, Lyn and I were talking this morning about the lack of leadership, and also I think a lot of the men specifically are kind of wussed out. And she mentioned how at Google they have a bunch of toys. I mean, the whole entire place is just made of toys. And we're thinking, you know, you used to go to work, you have to wear a suit, and not that everybody has to wear a suit, but you know, this is the goal, to have a workplace where you can play foosball all day long. I mean, these are some of the brightest minds in the world are working at these large corporations, and they're sort of being distracted with this frivolous nonsense. I am concerned that with the diverse viewpoints around the world, you know, how do we organize in a way where it's cogent? You were in Syria and in Rojava, how do you say it, Rojava?
Yeah, that's all right.
Rojava. So there were people of differing backgrounds there. I'm curious, why did everybody decide to sort of work together towards something, even though it's sort of an anarchist society and they have different backgrounds and they're in just a war zone? Is it because they saw how bad things can get, so everybody's a little bit more willing to make compromises? Or how does that work on just like a regular, like practical level?
Okay, so when I start to explain about this revolution, people say to me, "Oh yeah, well of course they're going to be like that. It's a war," and I'm like, "No, it's not, because they're in a war. You know, there's many other wars where people don't organize between each other, where it's just basically just utter chaos."
Mm-hmm.
But what it is, the reason why they're able to organize so effectively is because they have this strong belief.
What was that unifying belief?
Most people in general, don't have strong beliefs. So if you go to a group of people and you say, "Okay, look, guys," and blah 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 blah, and not exactly blah blah blah, but if you explain about society and you're like, "Okay, guys, there's this, and we're going to make this," and you explain about what the vision is, and you paint an image of what we can do and how we're going to do it, and you're very clear and strong-minded in that pulls people along.
Mm-hmm.
That's the importance of having a philosophy, having an ideology. It pulls people along. And what you have to understand is that there's a group of guerrillas in the mountains fighting for 30 years against the Turkish state, and they have an anarchist ideology, and they go into the civil society and they start to educate people, they start to teach them, they start to show them, and they start to organize the society. And because they have an ideology which they've studied for many years, that's what people do. They're doing in the mountains is studying their political philosophy. There is coherency in the movement. There's a sense of coherency between people, so people are able to work together. It's like, for instance, Buddhism is not necessarily an organized religion. It's a set of teachings. You study the teachings, you teach other people about the teachings, and you develop a movement from that. So what's important to realize is the political philosophy is not something that's not something that we can communicate in a catchy slogan or in a short phrase or market it to the masses. No, it's something that people who decide they want to be a part of this thing have to study the politics, have to understand what the ideas are, and then form their own opinions, because we shouldn't be dogmatic. We should be constantly questioning and overturning our beliefs and critiquing ourselves as well, so we improve our practice. But you have to understand that in this revolution they have a very well-developed political philosophy that basically cover huge amount of areas, drawing on from many different political philosophers like the postmodernists and Nietzsche, and talking about the roots of the state in early civilization, taking Fernand Braudel's critique of modernity and the economy, talking about how to organize all the different areas of life, from self-defense to economy, the role of the individual in the society. When you have that clear plan of action that people can form a nucleus around, that people can organize around, that people can study, that they can develop coherency between themselves, it gives them force as a group of people to be able to go and make that change. Mm-hmm. So I mean, like, if we wanted to have a group of people and we say, okay, all right, guys, we're going to have to do this, yeah, and we want to work together, like we can make like a, you know, like a central, we can make like, oh, this guy's working for this guy and this guy's in charge of this guy, and basically we make an organization with a strict hierarchy. But if we have a shared belief in what we're doing, and that ideology or that philosophy is able to inform people's behaviors, is able to give them a sense of, when I'm faced with this decision, how should I act? It can act as a guide for the life and put people on a path to be able to realize that change, and also make them effective at doing it because they can act autonomously. You know, the native Indians, when they used to be, they were like tribes that were living in balance with nature, and from a young age they're raised with their spiritual beliefs of the tribe and identity, and there's like a real sense of themselves existing for furthering the spirituality or their tribal identity. And they even used to do ceremonies where they'd hang themselves off ceilings from hooks to show to their tribe that, yeah, I'm not saying we should hang ourselves from hooks, but it gives you an insight into their mindset, that they were showing to their tribe that their body doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the tribe, and they would gain respect from other people by doing that. Mm-hmm. You know, so so we have to understand that, like, trying to further our belief or trying to realize our politics is not something that's fun. It's not something that's going to be, you know, like, enjoyable. You know, like that we're going to party and we're going to drink or do loads of drugs or whatever, and we will spontaneously create the new one. No, if we want to make a revolution, it takes hard work, hard, persistent, long-term work, and, you know, to get people around you, to teach them, to build them up, to go and to grow, to make projects, like real projects that have real effect. And having this understanding about where we want to be and what is the situation that we're in is really important, because it give a guide for how people can act, you know. So that's why now a lot of the technology projects that people are working on, they're very superfluous. A lot of the politics that people talk about are very confused. There's many different directions. There's not really any coherency. So, you know, like all the people that went to Occupy, they didn't really go there with a plan. And so what happened was Occupy kind of just fizzled out, because they got there and then they're like, okay, now what do we do? So if we do want to realize change, then we have to have a clear plan of, like, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And we need to develop coherency to be a front, to be able to move forwards together. And also an identity. You know, like right now in Bitcoin, I really think that, okay, Bitcoin has just transcended one really big power struggle for the heart of Bitcoin as a technology, and I'm very happy that how Bitcoin has gone. I mean with the Blockstream guys and Peter Todd, I have a lot of faith in those people. You know, I was involved in Bitcoin since the very beginning, so I interacted with a lot of different people, and I know what their personalities are, what their personal motivations are, and I kind of think that most of the guys who are on that side have a pure intent, which is an intent for Bitcoin, not for their own personal
Gain.
for their own personal gain, not to elevate themselves. You know, a lot of them, you know, even exist in the shadows, or had the chance to be able to gain power at different points, but didn't really fight for to take power over Bitcoin. So, but the other side of Bitcoin now is that Bitcoin is lacking a strong leadership, and when good leadership, I don't mean a leadership that can set good technical goals or understand issues around Bitcoin. I actually mean like a someone, or it doesn't have to be a someone, but it has to be like a vision behind Bitcoin, something that is driving Bitcoin towards a goal. Because lacking that, Bitcoin is just going to differ in lots of different directions. It's not going to drive towards something about what Bitcoin can be. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, technology doesn't develop in straight lines from worse to better. Technology can go in many different ways, you know, and what me and Cody did was there was a side of Bitcoin which is about the central banks, and there was another side opposing that with different values to us, and basically we've managed to go over that, and those values that were at the core of Bitcoin have been preserved, but it's not enough to simply preserve Bitcoin as it is, or what is. It's a continuous process of rejuvenation, of continually advancing forwards, of development, of reshaping our philosophy, because philosophy is not, and politics is not something that is eternal, that exists forever. It exists as a product of the contemporary moment. Like I'm right now, I'm an anarchist, but I also realize that if my vision of a society become preeminent in the future, that some people will also struggle against that in the future. There will be people who go, oh, it's oppressive, or it's bad, or whatever, and we need to do this. You know, now my political beliefs are a product of this contemporary moment that we find ourselves in. Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin is very much like that. It needs to be continually redefining itself, reinventing itself as a product of the moment, driving towards something, advancing upwards. The problem is Bitcoin is lacking this perspective right now. So it's a dangerous moment, because if Bitcoin continues how it is, it's just gonna kind of meander around, and then it's gonna fizzle out, because it doesn't pull people forwards to towards something greater. And it's not simply like a question of it's not simply like a question of, oh yeah, we need to build Bitcoin, the technology, and but it's also it's also a sense of well, you know, Bitcoin is something like a technology which has like liberatory potential, but the technology by itself doesn't really have any real worth, because it's human beings that are shaping that technology, that are putting their own ethics and their values into it. And something like Bitcoin as well, it can be a catalyst for a wider technological movement. And one of the things about technology is not that technology is invented and it just go into the public domain and it changed the society like that. No, technology is something that is made by human beings, that attaches itself to certain political movements of people, and then helps to advance those movements in a very symbolic way. And the human society and human development is not something to go into a straight line from worse to better. There are many different ideologies, there are many different kinds of societies, there are many different cultures with all different kinds of values. They're constantly in a process of struggle against each other. Some of them die out, some of them live. Some of those that live go on to create new societies, to go on to create new ideas that drive human beings, new spiritual beliefs, new political beliefs. So Bitcoin is a very important technology that is part of this process of advancing civilization. It's a very powerful thing as well, and it's not just Bitcoin. It's technology in general play this role in being a driver for the civilizational process, and
right.
And so now, what there's a lot of programmers, like really talented programmers, and they're very skilled, but they don't really seem to be using their talent. And part of that is a kind of escapism, where people are like, oh, I just want to escape into my computer away from the real world. The real world is not nice, it's imperfect. It's a very Christian thing as well. Like they're going into like a afterlife, in a kind of other world, where everything's perfect, and a computer command like never fails. It does everything you tell it to, and they can construct their own reality in the computer, and that reality is perfect, and other people can go and join that reality. But I think it's kind of dangerous. It's life denying, which is what Ethereum is, and that's why Ethereum failed. I think Ethereum is dangerous, but not for the reasons that people say it's dangerous. Whereas Bitcoin, the reason I like Bitcoin, and I've always stuck by Bitcoin, and I think I'll continue unless something radically different comes along, which nothing, not even Ethereum, is radically different. Mm-hmm. Is that Bitcoin is solve very real, practical problems that face humanity now, and I'm not a charity, I'm not a humanitarian. I don't, obviously I sympathize with people because I'm a human being, I'm a normal human being, I'm not a cold rational monster, but I know that giving money to charity and giving money to a homeless guy on the street isn't going to stop homelessness, it's not going to actually change those problems. The root of those problems is political. If we want to change those problems, we have to change the society. Like if I feed one homeless guy, it's not going to solve anything. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
So that's something with Bitcoin we have to realize, that Bitcoin is not simply a tool that I can buy a coffee in a shop and life becomes easier or nicer for someone. Like then we're just acting like a charity, basically. Like the same, like, or people, or like the example giving the money to the homeless guy. No, Bitcoin is a political tool to change the society, to actually excise these real problems, like at the root of the society. Like that's where we want to put our energy and our effort, in a very real social way. And when we look at Bitcoin in that way, then we realize that actually Bitcoin is not going to be this sudden bam explosion and take over the world. No, Bitcoin is something smaller, and maybe Bitcoin will not take over the world, and maybe it will. I'm not denying that. Maybe it will one day become big, but we have to take our minds away from that. We have to realize that Bitcoin is serving, even right now, Bitcoin is serving really important real uses, and how it is shifting society. And I'm not denying that Bitcoin help criminals, help terrorists. It probably does. But that is also something that we have to actually realize is a good thing. Like And I get, and yeah, terrorists kill people, and ISIS is a genocidal, mass raping, fascist motherfuckers that I fought against on the battlefield and lost many friends to. But, and I'm not supporting ISIS, but
Right.
I am supporting the political effect of Bitcoin, and which is, as a consequence, helping terrorist groups like ISIS to break down this global power structure, to subdivide it into smaller units, which are going to allow new political upstarts to take root within these new spaces, within these new power vacuums, and to advance forward, hoping, of course, that within one of those spaces that we can advance our political vision. Of course, for instance, like Donald Trump is a, well, you know, is some, Donald Trump is maybe something that's very good for America, because maybe he'd destroy America, you know, and you know, that's a good thing, because I guess we kind of need that. But you know, I don't just want to destroy the society. I don't just want to cause absolute chaos.
Right, we need to have something to fill in the void.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
right now, we're not organizing in any real political way, with any real ideology or vision that we can offer to people that can cause people to organize, to advance forwards. You know, like a lot of the things that people that are calling themselves anarchists are doing is lazy. It's intellectually lazy, and it's a lot of it is very narcissistic and very ego driven. People are losing themselves making toys, basically. You know, there is a lot of lifestyleism, a lot of people dressing in a certain way, talking in a certain way, but they're not actually believing in the things that they're saying. They're not actually trying to live their belief. And that's an issue. So I think there's also a deeper issue in Western society. Also a lot of these spaces which, you know, should be political, and they're actually all oriented around causes. Oh, we oppose this and we oppose that. They're not actually like trying to do anything. And maybe it also come down to actually anarchism itself, because anarchism is going, oh, we're against the hierarchy, we're against the state. Okay, then what are you for? So
Right.
that's why, like, that's what's really
we have
interesting.
to have a stand for something. Guys, I'm so sorry, but we have to wrap. Our show is normally about an hour, and we're
right.
over that at this point, and I think we could really unpack these things. Amir, are you coming to any kind of conferences anytime soon where people can hear you speak? Like, what are you working on right now before we end?
Yeah, right now I'm studying, and if I get invited to any conferences, I'll be delighted to go. And if they let me into America, then I'll go to America. So.
Oh, I hope that you can come to PorcFest. Me and Lyn will have to work on that one. It's coming up soon, and you would be very, very welcome, and we could talk about this stuff for hours.
Yeah, I'd love to go to America.
Excellent. So, Amir, thank you so much. Where can people catch up with you?
I have a website called amirtaaki.org. It has my contact details on there. If people need to contact me, that's it. I don't really.
Excellent.
I'm just reading right now.
Okay, well, we'll get all the news on there. And then Lyn, where can people find out more about Ross? freeross.org has the post that you just did about the built-in book. And
please retweet it and share it. But I just want to say to Amir, thank you so much, and for your insights about Silk Road but everything. This has been so amazing, really, to hear everything you have to say. It's certainly a lot of food for thought, and as me thinking about, I'm writing down some of your quotes actually, because said some really amazing, brilliant, interesting things. So I'm sure Tatiana and I'll be talking about it a lot after this. And yeah, I do hope to meet you in person sometime.
Thank you. No, I really hope to pay my respects to Ross Ulbricht, and yeah, I can see where he gets his mind from.
Well, not the math, but anyway. Great. Well, anyway, so thanks so much. This is just so interesting.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lyn, for sticking on with us. Guys, tomorrow we've got some more Tatiana show on, and we'll be posting this soon. Thanks to our sponsors, the Bitcoin CPA and Crypto Compare, among many others. Also, shout out to Sovereign Tech. Thanks, Amir. Peace out, everybody. Let's free Ross and start a revolution.